In this video, we're going to cover the patient chart SOAP note screen in Cary HD. Right now in Cary HD, there are 3 SOAP note screens that you can choose from, but the patient chart screen will become our preferred SOAP note screen. To get to the SOAP note screen, you're going to click on this SOAP tab. In order for a user to be able to see this tab, their user has to be set up as a provider. So any user that is set up as an administrator will not see this tab. So if you want them to have access to the SOAP Notes tab, just simply edit their user so that they are a provider. So I'm going to click on SOAP, Patient Chart, and you can see that it is still in beta form right now, but again, we're continuing to build this out so that it can become our preferred SOAP Note screen. Now here, this SOAP Note screen does look different than the provider mode or the patient mode SOAP note screen, but it has a lot more features, so we're going to walk through those. I'm first going to click on a patient over here in the adjustment queue. Each provider will have their own adjustment queue, so when a patient has arrived, they will show up with that specific provider. I can collapse other providers that I don't want to see. Also, here I have draft notes and incomplete notes that I can work on. Again, you can maximize the queue or minimize it. I'm going to click on this patient. As you can see, the SOAP note screen does have similar features, but there are some differences. So we're going to start at the top. Here you can see the patient's name, date of birth, and age. If the patient had a profile picture, that would show here. Snapshot will take you to the patient snapshot over here on the right-hand side. Call patient will allow the provider to call the patient back to the adjusting area once they are ready to see the patient. Up here is where you can toggle between 2 different screens. I'm going to touch on this in a second. Here's the pregnancy tracker. This is showing up because this specific patient has the pregnancy info set up in their patient profile. It's a pink bar because the pregnancy info is indicating that she's pregnant with a girl. If she's pregnant with a boy, it would be blue. Here are the options for how to submit your SOAP note once you've created it. You can always close the screen, save as draft, or submit. Once I start typing a note, submit will show here. Here's case information, so I can see current visits. On this Medicare case, there's 4, but total visits, there are 13 total visits across this patient's multiple case types. So here you can toggle between case types if you realize maybe you're on the wrong case. Here are charges. This is where you will enter and see all charges or services that you're applying to the patient. So right now I can see that this is set as that patient's default charges. If there were no default charges on the patient, that it would be a red warning sign, letting you know that there's not default charges set. And to set them, you just click into that box. So let me show you what that would look like. So here on this patient, you can see, as I was saying, there's kind of this red message saying there's no default charges. If I want to set default charges for this patient, all I'm going to do is click into this area and then add my default charges. Let's say I'm going to set these as the default charges, hit apply changes. Do you want to save as default? Yes. And now I can see those default services set for this patient. Going back to our original patient, here again I can see these are the default charges. If I need to charge the patient something different, or maybe edit my DX mapping or change the units, you can click into this area to open the transaction modal, or you can click on this icon. And here you can add services if you need to. I know this would not be a legitimate service to go to Medicare. So you can add services. You can change the responsibility. So I can make sure that's going to insurance. I can change my DX mapping if I want to. Here are the modifiers. And I can apply the copay, deductible, coinsurance. I'm not going to save those changes, but that's how you can edit charges or add charges on the patient chart screen. Here are chief complaints and care notes. These come from the case notes within the patient. So if I'm going to go to their snapshot, go to their case, go to their Medicare case, here, right next to where you enter diagnosis codes, is a chief complaint box and a care notes box. If it's flagged as important, have this checked, that care notes box will appear in red. So in this case, I'm going to put that this patient has a fusion, which would be important to know and the doctor to see on their screen. So once you update either anything on the SOAP notes screen or in the patient case boxes, they will reflect accordingly. So they will automatically sync. So whatever, if you type in something different while you're in the case, it will show up on the doctor screen. The doctor adds something into these notes box, it will show up in the case boxes as well. So they do auto sync all the time. Here you can see last note. This will pull from the user that was signed in and the date. We have reuse last note and our SOAP notes box, just like the provider mode. So I'm going to touch on this a bit more. Over here we have our listings. So this is where you can set listings for patients, and all you have to do is click into them. Click into the area and then set the appropriate listings. Now, I'm not sure if those are actual listings because I'm not a chiropractor, but I'm just showing you how it works. Here, the SOAP notes box and the macros work like our other screen where I can click reuse last note if I want to reuse this last note. Any data that is in this blue box is considered an advanced macro, meaning there are a lot of options set up with it, and I can easily change back and forth between my answers. So if I want to reuse this last note, but I want to say that her pain scale was worse today, all I have to do to edit my notes, quickly click into this and change the pain scale. If I want to add to this note, like I want to use part of it, but I want to add something else to it, I can quickly do so and it will show up here. Now here at the bottom, again, is your normal tabs to see those documents that are within the patient's profile. X-rays will show up here at the bottom. Anything that is set as an X-ray in the patient profile will show on this screen. Now, if I click into another tab and I want thermal images to always be the first tab, you can click on this push pin icon to default that as the first tab, but I have mine set as X-rays because that's the main thing I go over with the patients. You can click into the X-rays and talk with them. These over here are just drawing tools when you're talking. It will not draw on the X-ray itself or create annotations. It's just for speaking points when you're with the patient. I can zoom in. If I want to compare two X-rays, I can click on this plus sign, select the second X-ray, and it will show side-by-side images. Now I want to move to the top because here's the difference with the patient chart screen. You have patient info and note. Right now I have note, this tab, as my default. So every time I open up a patient, it goes to this tab first, which is everything you see here. But if I want it to default to patient info, which we're going to cover this screen in a second, you would click on this push pin to default it, meaning every time I open up a patient on the patient chart screen, it's going to default to patient info. But you can quickly navigate between the two tabs. Patient info has a lot of cool features on it to help providers with creating their SOAP notes or speaking with their patients or seeing where their patients are in their care. So here you can see the patient's notes box. This is this box that you see in the patient snapshot. Just like the chief complaint and care notes, these do sync automatically with one another. So if the front desk updates the patient's notes box on their screen, it will update on the provider screen as well. Here you can see diagnosis codes that have been set up in the patient's profile. I can get to the diagnosis codes by clicking on this icon, or I can click into this area and it will take me directly to the diagnosis codes. If a patient does not have diagnosis codes, it will look like this. So here I can see on this test patient, there are no diagnosis codes for this case. Again, to add them, all I would do is click into that message and it will take me directly to the diagnosis codes area where I can enter them in for this patient. Here I can see upcoming alerts for this patient. So I can see, okay, we need to schedule your x-rays. We need to, oh, this is your next appointment is the last one on corrective care. So these are helpful notes for the doctor to be able to talk with the patient and know what's coming up for that patient. Next to that is tags. You can see the different tags that have been applied to a patient. So you can see, okay, this patient is on corrective care, is pregnant, and pays per visit. I can update the tags by clicking into the area or clicking on this icon. Now, a fun new feature with the patient chart screen is this recent visits. Here I can quickly see if a note has not been done. So, oh, I see here that the visit for 8/12 is missing a note. I can quickly do that. But also, you can scroll down and reuse any note. So say I'm with the patient and it's their re-exam. In the provider mode and patient mode, reuse last note just simply reuses the very last note that was put in. So if I want to reuse the last re-exam note and just make the edits, I can click reuse. Or maybe, a certain provider does certain services like cupping and they want to just reuse those specific note and not an adjustment note. You can scroll and use whatever note you would like. So I'm going to click on reuse. And then it's going to pull me over to my SOAP note screen where I can then make the edits or changes or add on to that previous re-exam note. So it really just helps you reuse the specific note that you want to versus just the very last note that was entered. And again, once I've created my note, I can close, save as draft, submit and assign, or submit. When I hit submit, it will submit the SOAP note and the charges that are in this box. So at the same time, it'll post the SOAP note and apply these charges to the patient's ledger.